You're listening to the Author Inside You podcast, a weekly podcast designed to motivate you to finish writing a book, choose a publisher, and have your work build an audience. Keep listening if you're looking to get propelled into the next chapter of your life. And now, it's the Author Inside You podcast with your host, Leah and Matt Rafferty.
Hello, and welcome to the Author Inside You podcast. I'm Matt Rafferty.
And I'm Leah Rafferty.
Joining us today is Richard Webb, Jr., author of Boats Against the Current, The Honeymoon Summer of Scott and Zelda Fitzgerald. Besides being an author, Richard is a documentary filmmaker and historian who has taught at the high school and university level for more than 25 years. Thanks for joining us today, Richard. Welcome.
And thank you. You guys do fabulous work, and I'm honored to be on your podcast.
Oh, thank you.
Well, yes, thank you, Richard. So can you tell us how you got interested in F. Scott Fitzgerald?
I was 14 years old when it started.
Okay.
And they lived for just a brief 5 months, a quarter mile from the house I grew up in. And I started reading Fitzgerald at 14, and I read his second novel, which is the least read of all of his works, and it's The Beautiful and Damned. And back when kids played outside, I had ridden my bike all throughout the neighborhood, and what stunned me was I realized that half the novel was set in Westport. The fictional town was known as Marietta. And what was stunning to me was you can read that book and walk like a road map the streets of our town. Yeah. And so, I was quite young, and there was nothing like the internet. And I just thought this was the neatest thing. But then when I grew up, I found on the internet that this indeed was what they did. And to have that in your back, really your front yard, that Fitzgerald's writing about your place in your town, in your neighborhood. They literally walked by and drove by my house.
Wow, how exciting.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, it was one of their favorite haunts, actually. So
wow.
that just, one of the things that when I wrote the book really kept me going through what was this is my first book, an enormously difficult process that I had no idea of the work involved was just straight up passion.
Wow. So let's talk about that work. What was the biggest hurdle that you had to cross? Well,
I had a small boutique publisher who had done a good stuff, and just a very cool guy. He was a former Westporter himself and was intrigued with the story. I wrote probably 380 pages.
Wow.
And tremendous amount of research, 5 years of research. But by the way, every second of it, just pure joy.
I believe you. Yes.
Yeah.
When you find something that you're so interested in, then you learn something. It's so exciting. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it was the gift that kept on giving. The tricky part was when I submitted it to my publisher, and they had a really great editor, and I got along with her, which helped because she was pretty savage with the editing. I felt like Thomas Wolfe when Maxwell Perkins. Wolfe would drop 1,000 pages on him, and Perkins would try to get it down to 300. So I remember there was this great bumper sticker I saw that a lot of English teachers drive around with, and it says, "Revise, revise, revise."
Oh, okay. Yep.
And I heard another great quote, which was, you be prepared to kill your own child. Sacrifice your own child or something like that when you write a book. So, you hold on to these pieces that you feel are very important and argue that, this can't be cut. But you know what? If you've got the right editor, it does need to be cut.
Well, it is such a personal thing. It's personal.
It's personal, especially when you're writing your first book. So what's happening is you're doubting whether or not you're even up to the tasks and whether or not people are going to laugh you out of the room. So the whole thing is, you're walking on a tightrope. There's this great line, until you plagiarize it, it's not your own. One of the things that helped was just I read a lot. So I was able to kind of negotiate what I thought would be a path that would make a readable book. But I found out that what I thought could be a book was a book, of course, because they ended up getting it published. But that it turned out to be something that was even though the core of the book was absolutely what I wanted, and it turned out to be absolutely what I wanted in the end.
Great.
I was really, really surprised at how much of a blow to your ego you have to go through. But again, if you got the right editor and they believe in you and they think you got at least a modicum of talent, that's a major, major thing.
So tell us more about the blow to your ego.
Well, you write this book that, you write a book that you want to read. So the book I was writing was the book I wanted to read. Mm-hmm. But what I learned through the process of working with my editor and a publisher was that the structure of the book and some of the information needed to be edited out, needed to be cut out, needed to be reworked. And so that when I remember when I got my first feedback on the manuscript, I was just like, oh my God, really? Is this, are we done? Am I over?
Yeah. You felt like they hated it?
Yeah. No, it was just because, in the end, I knew they didn't. It wasn't that they hated it, but what I thought initially, because it was such a drastic. I mean, we had to take down, as I learned, to make a readable book, 380 pages down to 172. So imagine wow. you're sacrificing. I'm special ed math, so don't hold me to this, but 2/3 of the book is being sacrificed. What's great is I'm able to do those other 2/3 in a follow-up on the ebook. I'm able to put more information in.
Great idea.
So so that's that. That makes me feel good. But no, it's such an emotional process, as you guys know. This is your baby.
I really am interested in the research because that's what I particularly like. And can you tell us about, did you use your local library? Since they lived there for 5 months, were there artifacts there or letters or?
Great question. Thanks for asking. First, I read everything that was ever written about him and everything that they wrote. And that was just incredibly fun. And as a historian, I saw that historians that, were writing these books, these biographies, were making some mistakes, which I found. Oh. Yeah, I found. Well, you know what? In many ways, history is a game of telephone. So what happens is you find somebody that comes up with an idea, and then other people repeat it. And if it's a wrong idea to begin with, I mean, you know what it is? In the end, I don't think it's. I think that people don't have the time to check the sources. So I read everything that was written about him. I read everything that they wrote. And what was amazing was I saw these repeated patterns of this town, which is Westport. And it's a remarkable town because you could argue it was, as Van Wyck Brooks in 1922 wrote, it was the epicenter of the literary movement in the United States. Wow. At that time. So to see all of these references to Westport was staggering, and it had not been seen before. And what was fun about that was I realized that in a marriage that had gone Zelda was 19 when they got married and when they were living in Westport. And by 29, she was institutionalized. Mm-hmm. So what both of them did was they went back to their, your honeymoon is probably the apex of your marriage. Who doesn't look back on it as probably the best time ever? Sure. Considering the divorce rate too.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
what I found was Fitzgerald said we have 2 or 3 great experiences in our lives, and all we do is write about them over and over again. And that's what both of them did. And for the research in Westport, I did the traditional thing. I went to the Westport Library, and there's that old classic microfilm machine. Yeah. And I had to look at these 1920. I actually looked at 1917 up to 1920 because of the mystery millionaire that was in town had arrived before the summer of 1920. It was almost impossible to read. But what came out of that was, you can't beat, primary sources. And when I had to reproduce some of these articles for the book, it was not an inexpensive process to get these things printed and digitized and put into a presentable format. And what I also learned, and my publisher said, was do not expect to make money off of a book, especially your first one. Mm-hmm. And although the sales are encouraging, it's certainly, I was surprised at the amount of financial investment that you've got to make your dream come true. So that was a surprise. Publishing is, it's all changed, as you guys know. I mean, you're doing a podcast. That's a new thing, relatively speaking. Sure. So it's so fragmented and atomized that you got to grab an audience, and that's a tough thing. Right. So primary research, library research, microfilm, and just reading everything they ever did. And what happens is if you really dig into a subject, people don't have the time to do this, and they may not have the interest to do it. But being that I was able to pursue this so intensely, I was able to find those patterns. And I think that's what happens with the historians who really spend their time and dig and dig and dig. And again, it was a labor of love, so I'm not complaining.
Great. So did you do this full time?
I've just retired. I worked for 25 years in education, but what I did for the last 5 years was I went part time. I could have retired, but frankly, I really enjoyed the energy of the kids and teaching. But what was great was I was out of school by 10, 11 latest, and I could spend the rest of the day doing all of this work. So
that's great.
Yeah, nice.
And never mind the weekends and a strained marriage as a result. But that's why again, it was time. I had the time, blessedly.
I saw that you've been featured in the New York Times and Newsday. How did that happen?
We had a great publicist. And that was a huge key to this, because I found you can have a great story, and we did, because the press loved it. But to get it in front of them, I realized was a big task. So we had a great publicist that was able to at least get this in front of people. One of the things that I realized was they needed 50 copies of the book.
Oh,
that's
something new. Yeah,
I obviously for free. Well, I found out that's pretty standard, because what they do is they want to get the book in front of the editors and the journalists. Okay. So what was good, I was kind of surprised about that, because I was like, wow, that's a lot of money going down the drain. Yeah. What it did was it opened up all the doors, and it's funny when you write something, you write what, and you think, oh boy, people will think X, Y, and Z is interesting. Well, the New York Times journalist James Barron, found something in the book that he thought was interesting that I never, imagined. I thought it was such a minor thing. So he got intrigued. And then because really I was lucky to have a topic, The Great Gatsby, as one really fabulous academic, Fitzgerald academic said that the Gatsby is inexhaustible. So, you've had this read by so many people in high school,
sure,
that there was just, and it was local interest. It's New York and it's Long Island and it was Connecticut. But what was really neat was it got picked up by, I did a bunch of interviews all over the country, again because of the subject matter. But the key thing is, for people that listen to your podcasts and are interested in writing, a publicist is major. I can't imagine doing a book without having one.
And how did you find your publicist? Was that through?
Well, luckily she was. Yeah, we're 45 miles out of New York City, so we have. This town has always been a font, again, of tremendous creative types. So we just had a local publicist that was just fantastic, and so it was luck, really. But I love that saying that. There's no such thing as luck. It's when hard work meets opportunity, right?
Right.
And but in the end, I still think it was luck.
But it was luck.
Yeah. And what helped was that they believed in the product. So I think, I can't say this for sure at all, but I just think that quietly they went the extra mile that was, off the clock, that I was paying for the work to be done. And so I think it was really fun because, again, not to loop back, but my publisher was a really simpatico guy that I just got along with. And you're going to spend a lot of time with that publisher. So it's wonderful if you get along. And the publicist and I just got along too. So
yeah, that has to help.
No, it does. And I can't imagine doing it otherwise. Again, because, you have such an emotional product, right? So you're pretty sensitive to any difficulties along the way.
Did the publisher offer any publicity?
Yes. But what I found was that while they did, and it was quite fine, we needed to go the extra mile. And I found that while the publisher's reach was good, the publicist who works with so many different people and so many different authors was just, and that's what they do, right? Their focus is publicity. The publisher has many hats that they have to wear. So I was very happy with what the publisher was able to do. But the publicist was really fun. I'll give you a great story. Because what I do is I promote the book. I often promote the book along with film clips of our documentary, which is coming out in 2020. So we do a multimedia presentation with my film partner. And we have had up to 350 people in the audience. And, just the other day, I did a Barnes & Noble appearance where 2 people showed up.
Oh, my gosh.
So, what's fun is that, that was like my Spinal Tap puppet show sort of thing. So what's just again for your writers that listen to your wonderful podcast, be prepared to just have very discouraging experiences and incredibly ecstatic ones.
Mm-hmm. 350 people is fantastic.
Yeah, no, we've averaged a good number of people, but we've had our our sparse attendance as well.
You just never know, seriously. You know what's going on with people's lives that particular day.
We did a presentation on a Monday night in July in our town. People are going off to the Hamptons. They're going to Newport. Sure. They're going to a bunch of different places, and we had a tremendous turnout. And then nights where we thought that we would have good turnouts, we didn't. But certainly we had days of the week that we weren't thrilled. I mean, a Monday night is tough to bring in.
Sure, I would think. Yeah.
Yeah. So especially when you're coming out with a new product, I think that's what you might have to expect.
Right.
Can you tell us a little bit about your documentary?
We have a documentary, which is what happened was, my film partner is really the filmmaker, and I was the historian. But since it was, my story, I'm also in it quite a bit. So he's really the visionary and is doing most of the work on the film. And what I did was all of my research is in the film, and I wanted to write a companion book because we found out that we could have done literally, and this would have left so much material off. We could have done a 6-part 90-minute each segment documentary, but we had to get it down to 56 minutes because that's what PBS wants.
Sure.
Right. Yep.
And but I was wait a minute, hold on. There's a bigger story to be told here. So what we did was, the idea was that the film would come out first, and the companion book would come out second. But as it turns out, the companion book's is gonna be 2 years before the film comes out, but that works for us too because it garners interest. So we're gonna be finished by the spring of 2019. We may hold off the publication of it until 2020 because that's the century mark of when the Fitzgeralds had their honeymoon. Yeah. PBS has signed us a letter of intent, so we know they want to do it, but we're just unsure. There might be festival routes and Netflix if we're lucky. So we're not sure, but it's out. It'll be done by next year, and it might be out next year, but it might be out in 2020. What was funny was we met when we interviewed the Fitzgerald's granddaughter. She said, good luck because this is going to take you 6 years. And that was our first. That was our 9th month, and we thought it would be done in 2 years, but it's going to take actually 7 years. So that was interesting.
So she was wrong.
Yeah.
So Richard, earlier you mentioned the ebook companion. Can you tell us more about the ebook?
Ebooks are really easy to promote. At least with my publisher, since the body of the work was already done, it's not that hard to convert it into an ebook. And I'm still learning this, so don't hold me as fact on all of this. But this is as far as I've been told. And with ebooks, as I understand, you can get a lot more exposure. And so for example, on Amazon, you're selling your hard copy, but then you've also got the ebook available. And by the way, I'm also going to be doing a paperback. And what's interesting is with the ebook, if you've got pictures, you can put as many pictures as you want, more or less, in that. The paperback is going to have to be significantly edited. So I found out that in all 3 formats, there's different formats. And I found also that an ebook really helps because it's usually sold cheaper. Again, don't quote me on this, but I guess I am because I'm on the podcast. But as far as I know, it seems to bring you a bigger exposure. Another thing is the big thing that I think people need to, you got to spend money on this, but Kirkus Reviews is huge. And what you do is you spend a certain amount of money to submit and you have to submit at least 2 books. It's reviewed by at least one reviewer, if not more. And what happens is they'll give you a very dispassionate review, and it very well might not be a good one, and that therefore you can option Kirkus not to publish it. Luckily, I had a good one.
Good.
But by the way, it wasn't 100%. It definitely wasn't. But it was, I was happy with it.
And then where do people find those reviews? It's Kirkus.com. It's KIRKUS.com. If you look it up on the internet, you'll see. First of all, it's an industry-wide sort of thing that people read. Another thing is that librarians read it. So if you want to get a book, you want to get a book in the library. And another thing is, what's a great avenue I've learned is IBPA, and it's the Independent Book Publishers, I think, Association. And what you do is you submit 2 to 4 copies per category. So I had to give up, again, a lot of books. But one of the things was that I submitted it for the Ben Franklin Award. Oh. And the Ben Franklin Award, I'm not going to know till next year.
Okay.
But it's an award. It's an award that you hope you can get. And what's interesting about this is when you get these awards, they're great to put on your Amazon page. They're great to boost your book. But what was funny was I was told that it actually doesn't necessarily boost sales. It just gives
credibility.
No, exactly. It gives credibility. Most importantly, it gives credibility to the author, to the author herself or himself, that you get validation. It looks great. It's important. Again, one of the major things is that your work is recognized, which is fabulous. And by the way, I made sure to apply to an award that was legit, and that's another thing you got to get help with, is finding legit. Because I'm sure, I know that there's awards out there that don't really mean anything. But the caveat is, they told me, and I've heard, is that it very well may not increase book sales. So it's this kind of odd thing where it helps you, it helps your credibility, it helps your
ego,
confidence, but it doesn't help book sales. I don't know how that works.
Well, what I always like, so our podcast the goal is to get people to write. A lot of people have stories, but they're afraid to write, or like you had said earlier, who am I to write about this? What I like is that if you do one thing, the opportunities that open up to you, you just don't know what they are. And I think it's interesting how you have this book, and now you're writing. Now you are will have maybe a documentary on PBS, or you do have that signed.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, there you are. Now you're going to have a documentary on PBS. You have this ebook. I mean, all these things are happening all because of where your interest, of where you lived, and the Fitzgeralds. I think that's pretty cool.
Well, you brought up, I think, the most important point, especially for your audience. Everybody's got a book in them. Everybody. Not that it'll sell, but that doesn't mean it's a bad one. Mm-hmm. And the great thing is, don't think, just write. Write and have the discipline to do it, and just write. Write your heart out. And then what'll happen is you're going to have to revise. But I really do think that. I think, does everybody have the great American novel in them? Well, chances are they don't, but they probably have a great story that will connect with people. And listen, I wanted to do this for so many years. I'm 56, and I wanted to do this in my 20s. And one of the things that absolutely held me back was fear and a lack of confidence in my ability. But once you just sit down and write, and that's the big thing. They always, I remember my students, I always counseled them, what's the hardest thing about writing a paper, a research paper, whatever you have? Mm-hmm. And it's that first line, right? Sure. Mm-hmm. But just sit down and write. And by the way, that can make many a person absolutely, for me, an extrovert, to have to sit down and be an introvert. Oh my God, that's agonizing.
It's just me.
I never thought about that. Yeah. Interesting.
You guys have great questions. And from your podcast that I've listened to, what you're doing is really, really important stuff. And it's so great you're doing this.
Oh, well, thank you. So do you have advice for authors? I mean, it seems like you just gave some great advice, but we ask everybody what their advice is for somebody who's thinking about writing a book or in the process of writing a book.
You know what? 3 words. Just do it.
Excellent.
That's the Nike. No, that's right. The Nike motto for a reason. I think that, talk is cheap. You got to walk the walk. And that sounds brutal, but it really isn't. Again, I think everybody's got a story within them. Yeah. Just do it. You deal with, plow through your fears, plow through the rejection, and take advice at every step of the way. But just do it.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I think that's great. How can our listeners get in touch with you?
It's 1812llc@gmail.com. And so it's the war. It's the only American war with a number, 1812.
Yes, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, LLC, short for Limited Liability Corporation, at gmail.com. And I would love to, especially with people who are feeling that they're on the precipice and are scared. I would love to. I'd love to help them out any way. Listen, I was the last guy that I thought could do this, and I did it. And I did it for and through the help of many people. I'm no John Updike, that's for sure.
Well, that's impressive. So, Richard, you got to let us know when your documentary comes out, and so we can help promote that on our Facebook page. And before I forget, we'll have your email in our show notes if anybody's listening and can't write that down right now.
Oh, fabulous! Listen, I will absolutely loop back with you guys on that. And I really, one of the things is with doing all these interviews is I'm so honored to be able to, do them. So I really, really thank you for the opportunity to do this. I appreciate it, and I'm honored.
Well, thank you,
Richard.
Richard.
We're very thankful that you took the time to speak with us. Thank you.
No worries. Thank you so much.
Well, if you have a book inside you and you need to do a lot of research, Richard's story was a good one to hear. It's well worth all the effort and time that you put into your research project.
So thanks again to Richard for that motivational story. And until next time,
right on.
Thank you for listening to the Author Inside You podcast with your host, Leah and Matt Rafferty.